Hey everybody, because Halloween is coming up, I thought I would just give you guys maybe some movies that are on my mind that are horror related that might be good to watch on Halloween night if you have nothing better to do. Just stuff to get you in the mood depending on the type of horror that you are interested in. But before we get into that, I'm going to plug my website. As always, it is deepfocuslens.com. I'm an artist, I do commission portraits, and I also sell prints of my work. If that is something that you are interested in, you can always go to the website below. And if you have a question about a commission or a print, you can always email me. My email is in the description box below as well. We will start with The Innocents from 1961, and that film was directed by Jack Clayton. And I think this is a good movie if you're into the type of horror that's like more gothic. It's more reminiscent of like the Southern Gothic tales you might have read in the 20th century. We're talking about haunted houses, we're talking about repressed Victorian women in corsets and the ghosts around her that are haunting her, perhaps embodying her guilt or her repression or her fear. It is up to you to decide what that's about. But really, if you love that kind of stuff and you haven't seen this film, then you absolutely need to see it. I mean, I could recommend something that is somewhat similar. I could recommend a haunted house story like The Haunting, or even Rebecca. That's a film. Both of those films I really enjoy, but I think The Innocents is far better. I think it goes way further, and it's one of those where I complain a lot when movies are a little bit too ambiguous, but I think that the ambiguity here is a huge part about what works, and it's part of what's so haunting about it. There are no easy answers, but yet it's never surrendering to the open-endedness too much. I think this movie, in terms of the way the script is written, it's written actually by adapted by Truman Capote, but it's, you know, it's a little bit playful at times. It's a little prickly. It's strange. Definitely has some, you know, like sexual overtones for sure. A lot of melancholy, the aching lust. It is all there. Everything that happens is tied to something deeper, and a lot of the horror is very subtle. So I don't know. I think it might be a film you could enjoy. Next, I'm going to go with Don't Look Now, and this film was directed by Nicholas Roeg, and this film came out in the 70s, and I think I've said this before, but I just really love the horror films of the 1970s. It might be my favorite era, at least as horror is concerned. I don't know, there's a quality about it. It's like it has a smell and a color that is just really intoxicating to me, a nostalgic type of feeling. But if you are the same as me and you have never seen this type of film, then you should really check it out, because I think that this film kind of embodies a certain type of horror from the 1970s, kind of that 1970s occult horror, Wicker Man types of vibes and everything. But this film is very dreamy and very abstract. You're never quite sure what is real and what is not. And I would say that it's the kind of filmmaking where that art house style, you know, that was becoming very popular, and the visual images of that really blend into the surreal horror. And we definitely saw more and more of that in the 1970s. But this is a film that I think is maybe rougher to experience because of the subject matter. It is a very heavy subject matter where it's about parents who are dealing with the loss of their child. And even though you're never sure what is literal and what is a dream, in a way, I think that feels more intimate. It feels more intimately connected to the parents and their minds, what they're going through in their hearts. And loss, and the way that can distort your memory and distort the way that you see the world and darken everything about life. You know, that can be a really, really interesting sort of thing. How all of that affects the present, certainly the past, and naturally the future. So highly recommend that one as well. And then if you are interested in maybe Japanese horror, especially like mid-20th century Japanese horror, then I'll recommend Kwaidan, and that was directed by Masaki Kobayashi. It's a film that came out in 1964, and it's basically adapted from all of these Japanese legends, and it's basically just a bunch of different ghost stories. And if you know the Japanese, everything is very rooted in folk tales and very traditional stories, and I really like that. I love the visuals. I love the splashes of color in it, and just kind of this very spiritual, kind of earthy feeling to it. I think once I watched like Onibaba, Kwaidan, and House, all three of them together, and I don't know, that really, really worked. They have certainly a vibe to them. But yeah, just different ghost stories. Some are more compelling than others, some are more chilling than others, but certainly something a little bit different. And next I'm going to go with Ginger Snaps. This is a cult horror classic. It was directed by John Fawcett. And if you like movies like Jennifer's Body, and you like films like Julia Ducournau's Raw, then this is the perfect movie for you, because it's basically like the two of those merged together. But this was the original. And so if you can't tell, this is kind of more like a horror comedy, but it is more from the experience of the female, and a coming of age story, and how a female might experience, sexual impulses or violent impulses compared to, say, the way a man would. It's very dark, but yet the humor is incredibly biting, no pun intended. And in the end, it turns out to be quite an emotional story as well. And I don't know, I just think it's very interesting seeing things from a different point of view. I always felt like, the experience of growing up and how we can translate that into horror is naturally going to be very different from a female's point of view. And obviously this film deals with, like periods and that sort of thing, all of these burdens that are put on you as you're growing. And I think the difference between men and women is that, we naturally have pain within us. We have periods, and we have, the idea of childbirth. So it's already kind of within us, and we've got to live with that. And I get that feeling as I'm watching the film. Whereas with men, they don't have that pain naturally within them in the same way. All their pain is external. And so I don't know, I just find that dichotomy interesting, and it is a refreshing, different take on things. But again, as I said, if you like Raw, if you like Jennifer's Body, then naturally you've got to watch this film. And then finally, I'm just going to recommend a couple movies that are actually in theaters that I enjoyed that are perfect horror movies for Halloween. I'm going to start with Pearl. And this was directed by Ty West, and it is part of, an eventual trilogy. The third one has not come out yet, but Pearl is the prequel to X, and I found it to be, even though it's not as ambitious and it's not as meaty of a script, I found it to be much more emotionally engaging. And I found myself so taken with Pearl and so taken with Mia Goth's performance in it that, I definitely prefer it. Mia Goth, a revelation in this film. And like I said in my review for it, she feels like a cross between Shelley Duvall and Sissy Spacek, which is kind of the perfect thing that they're going for here. And just her vulnerability, but also she can be really terrifying. And also it's very rare that we see a horror film that is combined with like a Victor Fleming, like Wizard of Oz Technicolor kind of feel, or like Douglas Sirk, whatever you want to say there. So I just found it not only visually really interesting, but a very pleasant surprise. And then I have to go with Barbarian. If you just want to have a fun popcorn type of movie, this is the one for you. Try not to go into it knowing a lot. I would say maybe watch the trailer. That is totally fine. They did an excellent job on the trailer where they're not showing you much at all. But really go in, try to not know anything if you can, because that is what makes the film so exciting. There is a thinness to it. It does kind of fall apart for me in the third act, and yet I found it to be just kind of one of those very straightforward horror films, very bare bones, as I like to say, but the bare bones really, really work. Very cliche horror elements, and yet it feels like he's breathing life into them in a way. And you just really get hooked from the very beginning, which is something I don't say very often for horror films. And it's been a long time since I just really enjoyed a horror film, where I actually enjoyed sitting in the theater and I just wanted a big bag of popcorn. So if you want to be scared, but more in the sense that you're really getting entertained and it's maybe less deep, then, maybe that is a good film for you, though it does certainly have its share of social commentary at the same time. But so those are a few movies that are on my mind. Hopefully you'll watch some of them if you haven't seen them, and tell me what you plan on watching and give me some recommendations as well. But that is the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Over here you will see my patrons, who are wonderful. Guys, thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in supporting, the link for that is below, as well as the rest of my social media information. You can watch more videos here, and you can subscribe if you'd like. Catch you next time.